paper. I'm making sure my name is in the bottom right-hand corner, and I've got the tape. There's the thinner masking tape, especially on those smaller sheets of paper, is better. So I'm going to take my tape, and I am going to line the edge of the tape up with the edge of my paper, because that's going to give me a nice straight line, and then it's going to give me an equal, right? So even with that, and see how it's not quite at the end here, which is not a big deal, because then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a piece of tape, do this, hand it to my neighbor, let my neighbor have a piece of tape so they can do something. And yeah, you tape over your name. So rip off my tape, line it up with the edge of the paper, push it down. And we're going to do all four sides of that. Okay, so my name's on there. I might put my name on the back just so that, like, while the tape's on there, I know where it's at. But, yeah, as an artist, we put it in the bottom right-hand corner, which is down here. And now I can't even see it. Okay, so I got my paper all taped up, right? Now, the next part of this, and I'm just going to keep doing this in succession at this point, is we are going to take stuff, and we are going to trace it on my paper. And I'm going to use just a pencil right now. And two, I am going to make sure that I'm not drawing really heavy. I don't have to. I just need to have some kind of line going on there. Yeah? And even if we screw up the line, it's not that big of a deal. So let's say I'm tracing my, and it gets a little wonky. It doesn't matter. Even if I just drew it kind of by myself, it's okay, right? Because what's going to end up happening is after I go through and go back over all my lines, it doesn't matter anyway. So I can either draw with something and I can trace it, or I can just start drawing regular shapes in here and not worry too much about it. And two, it doesn't matter if it runs off the page like that one did. But I want to make sure I have a nice balance on the whole paper. And actually, that square needs to be repeated somewhere too, doesn't it? Okay, and then as the lady in the video said, what we're going to do is we're going to start running lines through it. And again, it's just a random line. Now, I caution you about getting too much going on too early, because like she said, we're going to go through, and at every intersection, what's an intersection? Where two lines meet, right? So at every intersection, I'm going to go through and I'm going to round it. Okay? So I got going on here what I want. Yeah? All right, and then I'm going to take, and this is the part where you can be using a bunch of different stuff. You can use, but okay, so if we want to use watercolors, and they're talking about your favorite thing to use kind of a thing, if we want to use watercolors, what kind of marker do I have to use?
A Sharpie.
I have to use a Sharpie. Why?
Because,
what would happen if I used just a Crayola marker?
it wouldn't have the color wouldn't be the same.
It'll see through.
It'll see through, or it'll bleed. That's kind of what it's called when you hit water onto something and the line starts to get a little bit fuzzy. We want to use that in watercolors a lot, but then sometimes we don't. Is there another kind of pen I could probably use in order to do this?
She said
Marker, maybe a pen.
She said a pen.
It has to be permanent, right? You can use a ballpoint pen too. And you'll notice that when we were doing these different kinds of ones, so this one, what do you suppose we used with that one?
Sharpie.
That's a Sharpie, yep. How about this one?
Pen.
It is a pen. I think it was a fine tip Sharpie, but it could be just a ballpoint pen at this point too, because a ballpoint pen will not bleed when you use it with watercolor. Okay, if you get it wet, it doesn't bleed. We can also use a colored pencil, But what's gonna end up happening at that point is you're gonna wanna make sure that you have a nice,
Be that price,
you know how
like
sometimes when we
this.
color with the color pencils, it's soft, and then sometimes it's harder? You're gonna wanna do it harder with the color pencil. I will say that if you use a ballpoint pen or a color pencil, it's gonna mush down your paper too, okay? Which means that if we get too wet with the watercolors, it will be in there. So we need something but too, with this project, you do not necessarily have to use watercolors. We did, and if you want to use watercolors, that's cool too. But you can also do it with a color pencil. It's just, and it's small enough that we can color the whole page, right? That's why we work with smaller papers. So, I need you to think about what materials you want to do, and then you're going to go through and you're going to start to do your lines. It does not have to be black lines. If you looked at the examples that were in the video that was included, some of the lines were green or orange or something like that. So if you have a Sharpie, I highly recommend you using that because I do not have a full set for the class yet. But we're going to get this together and then we're going to start to do like the lady said. And I'm going to do it with a Sharpie right now just so that we understand what's going on.
When you use a black marker, we don't have a Sharpie.
It has to be a permanent marker or else you will not be able to use watercolor with it. But if you're not planning on using watercolors, you can do whatever you want. Now, she goes through and she colors her stuff in completely, a lot like this style. There is a portion of this that if you're doing your lines well enough, like this one, where you can take and you can just make the lines kind of just one stroke. You don't have to thicken it all up. But you'll notice that we did get in here still and round all those corners. If you look at this, yes, it's multiple lines, but it is rounding the corners. This is just a different style. If we decided we did not like this, what could I do?
Trace over.
I could just trace over it. Very good. I'd just start filling in and coloring in those lines. So with this same thing, if I decide that it doesn't necessarily meet the criteria I want it to meet, I can always go over this again and fill in my lines and make them so that they're more solid. But we're going to get to these points and we're going to round these corners out and round this one out. So everywhere we have an intersection, it's kind of like, have you ever looked at the map of the freeway? It's kind of like that, where you've got the on-ramps and the off-ramps. We're going to make on-ramps and off-ramps in every single spot that these things intersect. And we talked about intersection is what? Lines across each other, right. Good job. And it's an intersection in a street, right? Like Cadju and Warren is an intersection. Get me? All right. So we're going to try and get this stuff going on today. You guys work in your own thing. But this is, I'd like you to get to a point where you maybe have shapes going on today. But if we don't get there, we'll do that tomorrow.